I want to welcome you all here tonight. My name is Steve Zeltzer. We wanted to have this event. We've had other events on privatization in San Francisco, and obviously there's an escalation of the attack on our communities, on our public spaces, by people who want to corporatize San Francisco. And when I heard one of the latest ideas of our mayor from the billionaire Levi family, that he wanted to have parking meters in Golden Gate Park, I thought, do we need parking meters in Golden Gate Park? Especially when we have over 80 billionaires in San Francisco. But that's part of the privatization of San Francisco. And we wanted to have this panel where people could talk about the privatization, different areas, and how to confront it, first understand it, and also organize against it. And so thanks for joining us. And our first speaker is Harry Privatization, and he's been a longtime activist around the privatization of the botanical gardens and importance of making that free. It should be free for working people of San Francisco, the public. Instead, it's seen as a venture, corporate venture. Last point, the corruption of privatization with the Park Alliance, contracting out of jobs, is all part and parcel of really the destruction of the commons. And we have to stop it. We have to end this privatization. And we have to put the people and working people of San Francisco in charge of San Francisco for the benefit of the people and not the billionaires.
We're here with Michael Sullivan, playwright and actor in the San Francisco Mime Troupe.
And not really a police officer.
And not really a police officer, fake police officer. You're in the semi-private Yerba Gardens in San Francisco.
Yeah, well, one of the things that people don't know is, like, in the history of England, in London, they had all these private parks. Parks were owned by different lords and earls and dukes and stuff. And so, strangely enough, part of our independence in this country was having public parks. That, in and of itself, having a public square, not just a common to feed your sheep, but a place where you can go to and relax, is a use of our public wealth, and it was a revolutionary thing. Having these all over the country was a revolutionary act, and now that we're losing that, losing the fact that our tax dollars have not only made these parks, but have kept them up all this time for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren, that what it's come to is those, would-be oligarchs in our country will do anything they can to make sure they don't pay taxes, to make sure that they are simply richer and richer and more powerful, rather than paying their fair share. No one should be a billionaire. There's no need for that. Remember one time I was reading this thing and someone was like, oh, this head of this bank, he's paid $100 million a year. He's the head of a bank. If he needs $100 million a year to live, that means he's not good with money. Shouldn't be in charge of a bank. Nobody should make that kind of money. We, our country, any culture, is about our Constitution and how we take care of each other. And that is what we're losing in the United States.
And here in San Francisco, the parks?
Oh, God. The idea that somebody can run a business and that makes them good in government and for-profit business are two completely different things. The purpose of a business is to make a profit.
We're here in Yerba Gardens. This is part 2 of my interview with Michael Sullivan. He was just telling me about privatization in Golden Gate Park. He just started talking about billionaires. So
yeah, well, what I was saying was that essentially government cannot function as a business. People keep thinking, oh, well, we got to make government more efficient, and we've got to make it so that it makes a profit. Government fundamentally cannot make a profit. It is not structured to make a profit. And people who are always thinking in terms of profitability should never be in charge of a government. People think that, like, Trump is trying to, he's trying to be a dictator. He's trying to be a CEO. That's what he's trying to be. He sees all of this as a business. The problem is a very essential psychological issue. People who are trying to be in business shouldn't be in charge of government. Government is a not-for-profit organization. It is a service organization that we all put money in exchange for services. Once government starts becoming something about profit, it becomes fundamentally corrupt and wrong. So we have to stop thinking that business, even the liberals all the time will be thinking, hey, yeah, business, we should be more business-like. Absolutely not. Get rid of that mythology in your head. Government is a not-for-profit organization.
Here's our mayor and two of his important buddies. Our mayor, Daniel Lurie, and his two buddies, Michael Moritz, who owns the SF Standard, who's a billionaire, writes op-eds frequently for the Financial Times and for the Wall Street Journal and so forth, and virulently anti-union, I believe. And this other guy, Chris Larson, who owns Ripple Technologies, Ripple Technologies is named after the Grateful Dead song because he's a Grateful Dead fan. And it's a cyber currency company, and he's the one responsible when you see all those LED light strings and the surveillance cameras. He funded those. Here's one of our great leaders, former leaders, Mohammed Nuru, being honored. And you see the Visionary Project of the Year, Candlestick Point State Park. If you've never been there, I encourage you to go visit and see what it looks like in terms of being visionary. It's kind of a wreck. Here we have Phil Ginsburg on the left. He's the head of Rec Park for many years now. This is his salary as of 2017. I don't think it went down. By executive order, Ed Lee named, I think it was called Middle Drive, Nancy Pelosi Drive, and without any consultation of neighbors or anything. And I don't know why anybody would object to that happening. They're expecting public process and not naming a drive after someone might consider has questionable ethics in terms of international politics. Here's one of the light installations they have. Light pollution is a major problem in our parks. Illuminate the Arts is the organization run by this guy, Ben Davis, and he never consults with anybody for his projects. They just suddenly appear, and if you don't like it, too bad. You can see here the Garfield Park Conservatory Alliance. This is just an example of Excella Nuclear is one of the sponsors. And so this is kind of the corporate infiltration of our parks. And one of the things people don't know about it is these community benefit districts. And these have a lot of really negative effects in the sense that they have a property tax on neighbors, and then that money will go towards creating this bureaucracy that's able to do whatever they want to do in the neighborhood in terms of guzzying it up. And this is about how people are able to manipulate a certain number of groups. They form these neighborhood groups that they're able to manipulate the process, and they're not really interested. They're interested in what they want, and they'll sell anything out to do that. And in this instance, everybody else was cut out on the design of these ugly parklets that went in on Irving Street at a considerable public expense bond money that needs to be repaid, that some might say weren't necessary. And then before the public meeting, they had a special meeting in the afternoon inviting people to come see the design, a private meeting not open to everybody. So certain people are privy and certain people aren't. You can't ignore the connection between YIMBYs and gentrification and park privatization. And the YIMBYs are really amazingly well organized because they have tons of real estate money, and they claim they're doing stuff for everybody, but they just took Proposition C money and they took it and put it instead on, at Mayor Lurie's request, on build more shelters, which is clearly against the will of the voters. And here we have a YIMBY Park hangout, and the Sunset Dunes Happy Hour, walking tour by the Sierra Club, plus WFDC, whatever that is. And so placemaking. And the Sierra Club was co-opted by the YIMBYs also. I believe that the same man who was elected supervisor to replace Aaron Peskin, he also was the head of the Sierra Club now. So the Sierra Club is no longer like the organization you would think it would be. They would stand up for, against pollution and for public access and so forth. They're about promoting the interests of wealthy people. And if Calvin Welch comes here today, he can tell you about the professional soccer team coming to Kezar Stadium. And I think one of the tactics they use is letting things deteriorate. And then by letting things deteriorate, then they can say, oh, we need to bring in a partner to fund things. And, a serious problem is light pollution in this city. But it's never talked about. And, here's an example. They have this, this is, a public ballpark privatized by Coca-Cola with the children's playground area having a Coca-Cola bottle, which seems slightly hypocritical in a city whose government has always said they're worrying about sugar levels in children. Here's one of the Illuminate projects that's soon coming to JFK Drive. All this stuff goes in without any public consultation, and you can't do anything about it. And it's all private money, so they use that as a justification, but really it's just a bunch of Burning Man artists that want their stuff to be permanent or shown in Golden Gate Park that are connected to this guy who runs Illuminate. And then we have the Ferris wheel, and we don't know why these lights were illuminated like this in Golden Gate Park, probably to act on the theme of making the city a theme park. And this was brought in by Parks Alliance. All the money originally was supposed to go to Parks Alliance for this Ferris wheel. It was never discussed with any neighbors except for the people in the local neighborhood group knew about it. And these are the names, you might give to like McLaren's Mobile, the Green Machine, the Green Wheel. And of course, if she agrees to sponsor it, Wilsey's Wheel. If people don't know who Diane Wilsey is, they should. She's one of the important figures in San Francisco. She's a Trump funder, and she basically uses the De Young Museum as her private finca. They evidently were framing her paintings and so forth. And then they have some other ideas to call it. This is the great intellectual intelligence of these people, the Dahlia, call it the Dahlia or the Jeb, or the Wheel of Love, because of the Summer of Love. And then the fun facts, they always sort of dumb things down, I feel like. So they provide these things, and they 500 free tickets. So they're able to get all these people from the neighborhood who had these, nonprofits for disadvantaged youth and elders and so forth to come and say, oh, we're getting tickets. It's a great thing to have this Ferris wheel. They'd love to come see the Ferris wheel. And then this is for the Ferris wheel was part of this canceled party in Golden Gate Park for the 150th anniversary, which they never bothered to ask or consult any neighbors about what we wanted. And these are all the people that gave money, but it was canceled, but then parts of it went on anyway, such as the Ferris wheel. And retroactively, they agreed to extend the observation wheel. It's bizarre that they would retroactively approve it, the construction, and then they extended it for another 5 years. And as Supervisor Elgardio said, it would need to rebuild the city economy because having a Ferris wheel would do so much for us. But then they moved it to Fisherman's Wharf, so now it's defaming North Beach. And these are all the people that went in and sponsored all of this. That are all, they all say, oh, we should all support this, including at the top of the list is the now defunct San Francisco Parks Alliance. So these people just kind of team up. Here's the the Goldman tennis courts that used to be a nice sort of mellow kind of place, and now they have it's privately managed, and you still have to pay, and whether you're a resident or non-resident. Presumably, if you well, it's per court, so it's not per person, but it gives a terrible image to people to come here and be overcharged for things, I think. And this is old, but I'm sure the amount hasn't changed that much. These are the amounts we give to the city. The city gives to these museums, and yet we get very little in the way of free admission. The Fine Arts Museums, that's the De Young and the Legion of Honor. So, you know what their total assets are? $309,223,393. And that they still have to charge $20 to get in for adults. It started out as $10. It used to be a lot less than that when the previous version was open. The Academy of Sciences, again, they have $761,119,834 in assets. And here we have really reasonable prices to enter. I mean, how can anyone dispute, say, a family of four can't spend $55 or $75 to get in? And this is from the Conservator of Flowers. The Parks Alliance put together a survey. So this is showing the restaurant they could get. Academy of Sciences, the Conservatory of Flowers could get a restaurant like this, and the Academy only gets 10% of the revenue. And then there was a campaign to privatize Stribing Arboretum, which first, when it started up, it was in 1927 by Helene Stribing, whose name no longer appears anymore. It was Stribing Arboretum. Then it became San Francisco Botanical Garden at Stribing Arboretum, and then it became San Francisco Botanical Garden. And it was done with WPA work. It used to be free to everybody. It was a great place, and now it's hard to go there. And this goes back a long time. The thing is, these elites, they don't stop. It started off as the Stribing Arboretum Society. Then the Arboretum Society was a group of local people, but gradually these rich people started affiliating themselves with. Some of them have garden companies. And so this is the way that they were looking at this time, way back when, during a few decades ago, under the Agnos administration, to institute fees, but Agnos wasn't an idiot, so he didn't approve it. And then they wanted to build this new greenhouse on the hill, and they got $1 million grant from the Goldman Fund. Oh, and I forgot to mention there was a $300,000 or $400,000 overrun on the tennis center, but the Goldman Fund did not contribute the difference. They still get their name on it. And the nursery was supposed to be here, but the nursery is now right where that says existing nursery now. So it's a fence right by the Redwood Grove. And a lot of gardens were denuded to put up this fence, and none of this project was discussed. I think they got around that, but I can't be sure just by saying that it's a nursery, so you don't need to have another, it's only a nursery. It's not a Center for Sustainable Gardening with a living roof on it. And this is like a list of lobbyists. So they hire these lobbyists to come in. In this case, Sam Lauter visited was paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to visit all the supervisors. And you can see also the Snow Lake Corporation, the Fisher Foundation, about the soccer fields. Because the Fishers, have this plan to put AstroTurf in all the soccer fields. So now we have that AstroTurf with those horrible lights out there at Ocean Beach. And this is the first reading to update the ordinance. And they put everything together, you notice. These aren't separate votes. So you're reauthorizing non-resident entrance fee, et cetera, making everything difficult. So if you're voting against one thing, you're voting against everything. That's kind of like Trump uses with a big, beautiful bill. They also are planning these winter lights. It didn't come to fruition, but that's the sort of thing they think in terms of marketing the place. The tea garden on this, it's hard to see, but it was $5 for San Francisco's residents with ID and $7 for non-residents. And the De Young Yeah, it's $20. Now that museum is, the tea garden is $20 to get into. And this guy wrote, so I think you can read it. This is, a message he wrote about this whole thing about how they cut down all these trees. And they've also put in this new large place to sell plants, and they blocked off the space in back, and they turned the demonstration garden into a celebration garden with corporate sponsors and hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax dollars, and they rent it out for weddings. This is sort of an example of the type of things they do with Groupon deal and 2-for-1 deals. Basically corporate tie in, so the place becomes very corporatized, but they don't see anything wrong with that in their view. The daily admission, this is for, if you choose to go on Saturday, and you can't prove you're from San Francisco, you have to pay $20.75. Otherwise, $17 at the door. If you're a senior, $7 plus $3.75 for the ticket, et cetera. And this used to be free. And even if they give veterans in free admission, they don't get free admission for their family, and we don't get any guests, and we can't do anything about that because they don't care. Here, the Gardens of Golden Gate Park is what they put together. They put together when the Botanical Garden Society lobbied the supervisors to create one entity that they control. And they paid, they were supposed to pay, I don't know if they did or not, the Parks Alliance $1 million for their so-called deficit to take over the Conservatory of Flowers. The Conservatory of Flowers was free until there was a storm and the windows were broken, and then they said, we'll replace the windows, but we have to be able to charge. So they turned that into a cash cow. Okay, and then someone put together this this consultants put together this survey for them, how they can make more money. Not the Botanical Garden Society, but Parks Alliance. You could use baby showers, and that's how much you would make for the baby showers. Corporate parties. And then now, if last week, I don't think it's there anymore, because I think the flower died, but you could see the corpse flower for a mere $25 in after-hours viewing. The question is why that place is not open every day of the summer for free after 5. And finally, we get to the Upper Grade Highway, which Mr. Chow was going to discuss. And they seem to have various names. I think this is by Lucas Lux, who is the head of the organization, but they changed it to Misty Mile Park because they didn't know what the name was. Then it became Sunset Dunes. And of course, when these people are really disingenuous, they talk about things, so they don't really address the topics that opponents bring up. They just avoid them. That's the usual tactic. And here's the tickets for outside lands. I think the best one is the Golden Gate Club in collaboration with Ken Fulk. Ken Fulk is some sort of designer. A 3-day is only $5,299, which is $5,095, including $204 in fees. But you could buy a single one too. And it's a single day, starting at $569 to go to outside lands. And there's 2 more sets of concerts now. And the zoo is a very affordable $29. I don't think the zoo, I have not seen any free days recently. They occasionally have them, but you have to prove you're from San Francisco. So if you're from South San Francisco, you have to pay. Or if you bring somebody with you from Oakland or Berkeley, they have to pay. So in that sense, it's a tax on you too. But the parking is $11, but $13 on weekends. And notice the price is higher on weekends when working people can actually afford to attend. And then David Romano is somebody I really recommend. He writes really excellent pieces. And he was writing about how if you go ROMANO on Medium, he went to the meetings of the Park and Rec Commission, and he was talking about how the Stephanie Linder of the Botanical Garden Society is a nonprofit partner of the Gardens of Golden Gate Park. And then she said, oh, it's so great. You know, we need to have this. You know, they give us a free booth. So these people are kind of complicit for whatever they get, and nobody seems to care about the environment or San Franciscans. They just care about money, and money may be going to somewhere else. There's local bands largely playing at Outside Lands or any of these other concerts. They're from someplace else. They're having the 3-day celebration of the Grateful Dead's music. It's not the Grateful Dead. I think they have two, One Foot in the Grave, Grateful Dead members, and then it's a cover band, basically. So for the Golden Road Super VIP ticket, it's incredibly affordable for 3 days. It's a mere $6,346.05. I mean, if your stock options vest, that's easy to buy. So in summary, I wanted to talk about the tactic used by elites. So for example, the decisions are already made when they announce the meeting. When they have a town hall, it's just to tell you what the hell they're going to do. You have no input. It's too bad the plans have already been made. And if you don't like it, you got to fight it, and you have a hard time. There are deceptive announcements and flyers and claims. So stuff comes in mail announcing the meeting, doesn't really tell you what the meeting's about, or the name of the meeting, or the name of the referendum, or whatever they're doing. They just deliberately manipulate things. The moving dates of government hearings or votes without private notice. For example, like Richard Ivanhoe here in the office, here in the audience, he had to give his seat to Aaron Peskin at the Coastal Commission because they moved the time up at the Coastal Commission when they were discussing the soccer fields. And so therefore, nobody who got there after the beginning could put in for public comment. And of course, it did no good. There was a lovely videotaped announcement, which I don't know who paid for, by Eric Marr saying how great the soccer fields would be. But of course, we don't really have a voice because they manipulate things with a lot of money and a lot of consultants, otherwise known as lobbyists. Limiting public comment to 2 minutes while giving unlimited time to department presenters. Like today, for example, at the meeting, the chair, the sole DSA supervisor, she only gave these people from these destitute nonprofits who are sponsored by Parks Alliance 1 minute to comment at the hearing. And it's unfair that we're only able to talk for a short time while they're able to go on and on and on with a lot of BS that take a lot of time to rebut. Manipulated surveys intended to secure a predetermined result. For one thing, they put the surveys online. The second thing is they ask you questions that are going to get you to answer a certain way. No meetings or meetings at times people cannot come. They schedule meetings, noon, and the supervisor does the same thing. Supervisor Melgar comes to my neighborhood, and she comes in at like 11 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock to meet people. Most working people can't go to that, and you're not having a real meeting. And speakers dominate conversation, leaving little or no time for real dialogue. So they basically just talk to you, and then they hardly give you any time for questions. If their questions are on question cards, so they can control what questions are asked. Breaking into groups. This deprives everyone of having a unitarian discussion. Okay, we're going to break into a group to discuss this as a subject, but it deprives everyone from getting up and asking a question and saying, and then other people challenge it or other people agree with them. Organizers change the subject when probing questions are asked. I think that's obvious. Questions generated from question cards allowing selectivity, I already said that. Time restrictions based on community comment, I already said that. News, media misinformation, and they definitely are very manipulative of the chronicle in the way they talk about things. And even the headlines can be disingenuous. And Rachel Gordon, who went on to be the spokesperson for DPW, was the one writing about the park privatization, and she was writing things that are really disingenuous. Heather Knight, who's now at the New York Times, she's also terrible. Very, very biased. Surveys online are given limited circulation towards an outcome. I think I already mentioned that. meaningless buzzwords such as stakeholders and community to defend tactics. They don't act, they say, oh, our community decided. Oh, we had a community meeting. Well, I didn't know about it. What was that? Oh, we told the neighborhood association. Implementers believe in the myth that, and motivations for park and open space privatizers. Implementers believe the myth that government should be a business. The BMOC syndrome, donors or VIP will get special attention every time they pass through a ticket gate. So if you're a donor, you feel like you're a big man on campus, you go to the Arboretum and they say, oh, Mr. So-and-so, nice to see you here. Restrictions, whether they will admit it or not, implementers want to restrict access. I had a gardener at the Arboretum tell me, oh, we get a better quality of people here now. Donation incentive. Donors want nonprofits to charge admission if they're giving. They feel like, why am I giving money? If you're not charging, why aren't you charging? You should be charging. I'm not giving money if you're not charging. And then jobs. Nonprofits can provide jobs for well-connected individuals. I think that's obvious too. Status, having your world-class entity as additional status to the donors and management alike. Oh, it's a world-class city. We have world-class botanical gardens. We don't have a boring arboretum anymore. We don't, our tea garden is part of Golden Gate's Gardens of Golden Gate Park, something you absolutely have to visit if you come here. And finally, naming rights. Private control over public resources facilitates memorializing donor class. If the donors are not allowed to invest and pay money, then they're not going to, then they can't have their name on it. And the reason why they're giving money is so they can have their name on it, and that's all.
Thank you very much for that useful presentation. And bringing all these stories together is very important. The city faces a massive budget deficit, as everyone knows. $700 million, they're going to have layoffs, yet it seems like they have unlimited money for new parks, for new projects. Why is that? Who's in charge? And I was involved, and the police, more money for the police. I was involved in the fight at City College against the development, the land development there of housing, and the city spent millions of dollars to develop that for the developers. So at the same time, students can't afford to go to City College, and you have students who are hungry, as well as adjuncts who are desperate. So anyway, another project of the politicians here, the past mayor and the present mayor, Daniel Lurie, is this so-called new park. And we have Albert Chow, who is with us tonight, who is a community activist and also Great Wall Hardware. He's with that firm, and he's been a spokesperson. And I think that there's been a campaign by the corporate media in San Francisco to go after the people from the community who want the community really to be in charge of what happens in their community. So welcome. Thank you very much for that useful presentation. And bringing all these stories together is very important because, as you pointed out, the newspapers here, the reporters at the Chronicle, don't necessarily have an objective view of what's going on in San Francisco because they are developers. For people who don't know, the Hearst Corporation, which owns the Chronicle, is a developer, and they're developing their land as well. So, and they've been pushing developments and all over the place without really letting people know. And I covered the new park, quote unquote, new park that they have, and talked to people who were there to protest, the residents, and you wouldn't really know. Can you have your?
Yeah, what's your name?
My name is Steve Zeltzer.
Thank you.
Yeah, you wouldn't know what the residents were really feeling unless you went there and asked the people who were there protesting what it was about. So I think we have to get to the people in the communities, in the districts, to find out what's really happening. So the city faces a massive budget deficit, as everyone knows. $700 million, they're going to have layoffs, yet it seems like they have unlimited money for new parks, for new projects. Why is that? Who's in charge? And I was involved, and the police, more money for the police. I was involved in the fight at City College against the development, the land development there of housing, and the city spent millions of dollars to develop that for the developers. So at the same time, students can't afford to go to City College, and you have students who are hungry, as well as adjuncts who are desperate. So anyway, another project of the politicians here, the past mayor and the present mayor, Daniel Lurie, is this so-called new park. And we have Albert Chow, who is with us tonight, who is a community activist and also Great Wall Hardware. He's with that firm, and he's been a spokesperson. And I think that there's been a campaign by the corporate media in San Francisco to go after the people from the community who want the community really to be in charge of what happens in their community. So welcome.
Steve was so kind to introduce me. I am the owner of Great Wall Hardware, so I have a little tiny hardware store over on Terraville on 28th Avenue. And unfortunately, last year, someone arsoned my building. So now that I have all this free time, I get to be a political activist. So anyway, the reason why I got into that fight was because our supervisor, not yours, our supervisor, District 4, Joe Elgardio, had promised on his campaign when he was running against Gordon Marr that he would keep the status quo, which was that the Great Highway be closed on the weekends and open to traffic on the weekdays. And I thought that was a very fair compromise, considering we were coming out of the pandemic. But we realized what a treasure the Great Highway was as a park, so you could use it to walk, ride your bike, take your kids out, teach them how to ride their bikes. It was a wonderful scene. But at the same time, there was the absolute need of people having to go to work. This is a very expensive city, and people need to get to where they go. And at the time, there were 17,000 cars on average using that road every day, Monday through Friday. So our supervisor clandestinely planned this closure with, I think you mentioned Lucas Lux. He was
Yes.
he was one of the people that was actually at these closed door meetings. There was another guy named Todd David. I can't.
Todd David is with this developers, right?
Yes, he's had numerous interests in closing roads and creating kind of laying the groundwork for development. So what I had also found out is that if you close the Great Highway and turn it into a park, now you reduce the barrier to developing the 48th Avenue Great Highway in La Playa, because now you don't have to have a certain requirement, a CEQA requirement, when you don't have a road in front of you. So this was kind of a way to lay the groundwork for creating an amenity for someone that's going to build full market rate housing at the beach for people that are not you and me. I mean, I own a business, but believe me, I'm not rich. I work hard every day. And I've got 2 kids in school, and so I feel like I've been there for 50 years in the Sunset, and I'm born and raised here. Why am I not having a voice? So going back to the clandestine effort by Joe Elgardio, he met with less than 10 people to formulate this ballot measure. And the thing that really got me angry was that I, as a community leader, and I'm the president of Merchants Association on Terraville. Sorry, backtracking a little bit. Called POPS, People of Parkside Sunset. There's also a Irving Street Merchants Association, a Beachside Merchants Association, and there's numerous community associations throughout the Sunset. We met quarterly, it was called One Sunset meetings. And we would meet in a coffee shop, at a restaurant, or in Joel's office, and we would talk about what's going on in the city or what's going on in our district, events, security, safety issues, schools, litter, what have you. And we would always bring up everything, and everybody knew what was going on in our district and how to, use our resources to create a beautiful place. The closure of Great Highway was never mentioned through the 3 quarters before he introduced it. And then he introduced the ballot measure on the last day to the Board of Elections. So we were on the back foot. We had no time to respond. And so a lot of us really talked to him, begged him, pleaded with him, cried in front of him. Literally, I had other people just literally in tears because they said, I supported you because you said you would keep the status quo. And he was just completely silent. And what had happened was I forgot exactly what day it was, but it was in July, so a year ago from today, a year before around this time today, where you can actually withdraw the ballot measure. And he called me the Friday before the Monday where you get recalled the ballot measure. And he says, Albert, do you really want this? I said, of course we do. I want to have a town hall. I would like you to withdraw the ballot measure, at least have a town hall, talk to all of us that care about it in our community, and then reintroduce something that we can all live with. And I would support you 100%. And he says, okay, I'm going to do it. And then Saturday, Sunday afternoon, I get a call from Joel. He says, I changed my mind. I'm going to go ahead with the measure. I said, what happened? He goes, I made some phone calls, and I can't do it. And I know after that phone call that one of the people was Scott Wiener that pushed him, that gave him pressure. And we knew that at that point, that betrayal started that slippery slide where, we all think that this is, he says this is only one reason why we're letting him go. We want to recall him. But it is his behavior. It is him being sold out. Because now if you look at all the supporters, it's Jerry Stoppelman, the CEO of Yelp, Ron Conway, a big, what do they call it, angel venture capitalist, Chris Larson, who I mentioned earlier with cryptocurrency, and there's a couple other ones. I think there's about 6 people. You can see it in the SF Ethics. You can see who makes the contributions, but they're paying into his coffers for this war chest to fight his recall over $1 million now, from Prop K through the signature petition through now. And I tell you, this is what I've been doing with all my time. He really got me fired up.
We're here with Michael Sullivan, playwright.
That's okay.
And
Shut that off.
I like live performances. Nothing goes right and it's fun, right? That's why I love Saturday Night Live. So anyway, the thing was that because of that, those donations from people that come from not in our neighborhood, I feel like they're buying him. They're drawing his puppet strings and pushing him to run their agenda, really. Because why would you, think about it. I love your neighborhood. I go to Haight Street. I've gone up, like I said, I was born and raised here. I love the Haight Street fairs. I come here to eat lunch and dinner and stuff. I love Robert's Hardware, because, hardware store guys stick together. But, what if someone tried to buy your neighborhood? And buy... Yeah, right. And there's more of this to come. And it's not affordable housing they're advocating for. It's market rate housing. And we have enough of that. And a lot of it nobody can afford. For a good example in my district is the Westerly condos. They're right at, if you go to El Terraville and you ride all the way to the end, right where El Terraville turns around, there's a brand new, well, not brand new anymore, it's like 4-story condo plus a huge retail space down below. Big enough for a supermarket. It's been built, it's been up for 10 years. They've never had an anchor business go in there. I think half the condos are sold. And that was market rate. And it's not moving. And then, of course, the preposterous idea of building a 22-story thing at the Sloat Gardens, which everyone, of course, shot down. Because I think, again, one of my biggest questions was that, where's all the sewage going to go? Where's all that infrastructure that's going to support a 22-story building? Where
all the roads now, probably for UCSF, the big new development.
Right, but over there at least we have some precedence of tall buildings because it's an institution there. But it'd be like this, like flat 2-3 level buildings throughout the Sunset, and all of a sudden you have this monstrous building coming up that nobody's going to buy at market rate. We have high interest rates now, and again, people are struggling. Families come out to the Sunset because they want single-family homes, or at least low density, because, what we have there is kids. We have families that are start families there and raise their kids. They have good schools there. There's parks. We're blessed with parks. We weren't asking for another park. What we're looking for was a way to get around the city, and that was the importance of the Great Highway. And for them to close it down for the few and ignore the many, I thought was incredibly unfair and undemocratic and not worthy for someone to hold the supervisorship and make decisions for our community. And that's why I had to do what I had to do to champion recalling our supervisor. So, any questions from anybody? Right now, I'm working on recalling our supervisor. I heard Supervisor Connie Chen in District 1, which is the Richmond, she wants to introduce a bill, should the recall be successful, to reestablish the Great Highway as it was before. Here's the thing. I feel like, you know, a lot of supervisors, and indeed a lot of people that voted on Proposition K, you know, that were not in our district, because, you know, we know kind of what that Great Highway means to us, because we use it all the time. But I think the people in the north part of the city, the east part of the city, the middle of the city, they thought the way the ballot measure was written, you know, close down a road, create a recreational space, you know, closing the Great Highway. They probably thought they were doing us a favor. I bet you, because the way it was written, it sounded like a nice thing. Why wouldn't you want to park? But I think we were mentioned earlier, you know, we have Harding Park, we have the zoo, we have Stern Grove, and we have this world famous thing called Golden Gate Park right next to us, and we have the beach. You know, I heard that Dorsey, who was one of the endorsers of that bill, was hoping that it would get taken down by Joe Elgardio, and then also Raphael Mandelman. I don't think Melgar was gonna withdraw her support, and that's what I heard. So I can't say that for sure, but that's what I heard. I know Connie Chan was definitely against it, because if you look at the Richmond from a map, bird's eye view, they're already, you know, cut off to the north by Presidio, to the west, to the south by Golden Gate Park, and now to the west by Great Highway. The only way out really is going east, like going downtown, like taking Geary Boulevard, going downtown.
Albert, you forgot to mention the great weather at the upper Great Highway.
It is great weather. We have our own natural AC.
And the sand is blowing in my face, and I go back, I get defeated.
I will tell you that on the good days, it's a lovely place to be, you know, those good days. But right now we're having a really good Mark Twain summer, aren't we? And I want to tell you that, you know, like it varies. Like some days you'll see a few people riding bikes on that road, and some days you'll really see several hundred, even 1,000 people riding bicycles and having fun on that road. But no matter what the weather is, day in, day out, there's 17,000 people that need to get to work. They need to take their parents to the doctor, take their kids to school. God forbid, I have 2 kids. I have one that's in nursery and one that's in first grade right now. When I get 2 of them in 2 campuses, you know, and they got early start times, I'm going to be running all over the place. And public transit sometimes just falls short. I'm not saying that cars aren't the enemy, bikes aren't the enemy, walking's not the enemy, public transit's not the enemy. They're all valuable in the ways that get around town. If you just have an A to B commute every day, maybe public transit works really well, you know. But sometimes when you have multiple tasks, as a small business person, I have multiple tasks. I can't, you know, riding a bike or taking the bus, for the most part, doesn't work for me. But like I say, if I'm going downtown, I'm going to City Hall, because I have to give my 2 minutes. I do take the bus, because it doesn't, you know, it's a lot bigger hassle to take a car down there. And I have the Alterville, it's really quick. So, you know, it's a multifaceted argument here. There's a few of us that if he were recalled, then Mayor Lurie were to appoint. I've been asked, I'm just full disclosure, and if they do, I would say yes.
Is telling a little story, a narrative story about 30 years of dealing with Recon Park over Kezar Stadium, and the lessons that I believe this neighborhood has learned. I'm a member of the board of the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council, and there are a few members here. And the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council was formed to oppose the Panhandle Freeway, which was a proposal made variously from
Move that down a little bit.
about 1956 through the ultimate vote, which was in 1964, in which the Board of Supervisors refused to vacate the streets. That's the only vote that San Francisco had against a proposal that was coming from the state. And at the time, land use decisions were a county decision. The state could not preempt a county over especially taking over city streets. And by that thin thread, the Panhandle Freeway was voted down on a 6-5 vote at the Board of Supervisors, with, amongst others, George Moscone casting the deciding 6th vote when he was a supervisor. So the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council in Golden Gate Park has had a symbiotic relationship, a love-hate relationship since the inception of the Haight-Ashbury Neighborhood Council. And one of the visions that came out of this long-standing relationship between the Haight-Ashbury and Golden Gate Park was when the school district decided that then Polytechnic High School was surplus to its needs and closed Polytechnic. And for a few years had it be a backup high school while a high school was built over the hill. And then it stood empty. And the community went through a planning process, came up with a proposal that became Parkview Commons, that was affordable family housing. Parkview Commons has a majority of 3 and 4 bedroom units. Of the 108 units, 60 are 3 or 4 bedroom, a rarity at the time. Part of that vision was dealing with empty Kezar Stadium. Kezar Stadium, for folks who don't know, was the premier football pitch in San Francisco. And for, I think, 25 years, it was the home of the San Francisco 49ers. And great stories are told around the neighborhood of kids renting their neighbor's garage driveway to 49er fans for parking without, of course, the understanding or permission of the owner of the driveway. It was an entrepreneurial endeavor that was still fondly remembered by some old-timers in the neighborhood. Part of the planning process, the community planning process, that involved people from the inner Sunset as well as the Haight-Ashbury around Parkview Commons was Kezar Stadium. And again, to make a long story short, Art Agnos, when he was elected mayor, agreed that Kezar Stadium should be rebuilt. And it should be rebuilt at the community's insistence as an open recreational facility, open much like the polo fields, in which the primary use would be recreational and high school and middle school sports, football and track. And so a Olympic-size field for soccer was built that greatly accommodated American football. And a first-rate, then state-of-the-art track was built. And as soon as the facility was built, Recon Park, well, before it was built, the plans that were approved had no exterior fence. It was totally open. There was some tree planting, but there was no fence. As it was built, we noticed a fence being built. And so we engaged with Recon Park, and straight up, we want it for a revenue-producing facility. we need revenue. And we want to be able to fence it off from the public. And from then on, there has been a struggle over basically the private use or the revenue generating use for Rec and Park and its friends, and the use of an extraordinary facility as a recreational and open facility for residents of all ages and situations in this part of the world. It's been an endless struggle, and in that, some of us have come to understand the relationship between Rec and Park, basically the real estate development community, realtors, developers, and the city bureaucracy, Rec and Park. And there is a natural affinity on the part of the bureaucracy to prefer to deal with, well, first of all, Rec and Park is a revenue department, but it's a revenue department that is supported by, overwhelmingly, by funds from the general fund. Although it likes to promote itself as a revenue department, it is a general fund funded department like the police department, like the fire department, like the Department of Health and Human Services. But they, as is not uncommon with bureaucracies, they basically view the facilities as theirs in trust of public use. They know better. And specifically, what the bureaucracy of Rec and Park, and it's incredibly consistent over time, prefers is not to pay for the ongoing maintenance of any facility, but to build new facilities or to create new potential revenue sources. And you cannot really understand the great highway struggle unless you understand that aspect of the relationship between Rec and Park and the real estate industry in San Francisco. In my view, the essential reality of the park in the West is to provide that park space for the dramatic increase in residential density being proposed by Mayor Lurie for all of Western San Francisco and virtually all of central San Francisco, including this neighborhood. We're talking about, as a matter of right development, of 80, 90, 120 feet. By as a right, I mean no public hearing. The permits are issued. You go in, you apply for it, and it is issued as a right to the developer. The greatest density is proposed, of course, along the waterfront, and it will be that real estate value will be preserved by a public open space along the beach. And the fact that residents weren't part of the planning process is exactly how it was supposed to work. This was a deal made basically by real estate investment interests and the city bureaucracy. So too with the ongoing struggle around Kezar Stadium. last May, the Rec and Park Commission accepted a lease negotiated by the department with a professional soccer team, a 10-year lease for which there would be the normal payment for every game, which is about $85 to $10,000, $8,500 to $10,000. Additionally, the team has committed to investing $10 million in the facility. All of the seats in the facility will be replaced by more comfortable seats. Those seats are the seats from Candlestick Park. They will be replaced for more comfortable seats for the viewers of soccer, of the soccer league that will be there. And the scoreboard will be greatly enhanced, will be much larger. They wouldn't let us know how large. And yes, there will be, how the staff describe it, there will be advertisements on the scoreboard, but not commercials. That's a very fine distinction. Yes, there will be advertisements, but they won't be commercials. The extraordinary aspect of the deal, well, the improvements will total $10 million over a 10-year life of the lease that is able to be extended for a full period of 30 years, an extraordinarily long time. $10 million for improvements that are basically aimed not at improving the experience for recreational users, but are mainly aimed at increasing the value of the venue to a commercial soccer team. So it is in that, complex set of relationships that we learn at the end of this, that it turns out that the owner of the soccer team, who has just been granted the lease, contributed about $800,000 over the years to Mr. Lurie's private foundation. And that they were longtime acquaintances, which I guess is just a coincidence. So the interrelationship between privatization and public land in San Francisco, we have to understand, is facilitated by the bureaucracy in San Francisco, by the departmental structure. And all too often, activists in this town don't pay sufficient attention to what is really the principal source, the principal governmental power in San Francisco. It really isn't the Board of Supervisors. It really isn't. It's the standing bureaucracy. Those are the enduring, they have no term limits. Those are the enduring definers of public policy in San Francisco. And so any hope for change means a hope for change will have to include a change in the way the city organizes itself to deliver services in something other than a strict bureaucratic structure with no real oversight. I'll leave with this. I don't know if anybody had a chance. I was mesmerized like a moth to the flame watching the hearing today on
Parks Alliance.
Yeah, on the San Francisco Parks Alliance.
Parks Alliance.
The Parks Alliance, which, as folks may or may not know, was amongst other things, a 501c3 sponsor for several dozen community-based efforts to make improvements to parks or open spaces in their neighborhood. In many cases, doing work that a more publicly oriented rec and park department might have done, but didn't, and was left to the good heart and decent activity, volunteer activity, of residents of those neighborhoods. Anybody who knows the game knows that if you accept a grant from a foundation wants to know that you're a 501c3 or at least have a nonprofit tax-exempt sponsor. Well, these are neighborhood and community volunteer groups. They aren't going to incorporate a 501c3. And they were basically steered by mainly Rec and Park to the Parks Alliance to have them be their fiscal agent. Well, they were the fiscal agent of several dozen community-based open space improvements to the tune they received maybe, well, it's a little unclear, but several millions of dollars from these groups into their own accounts, and they were the fiscal sponsor. Well, it turns out there was basically embezzlement, and that the money that was supposed to be restricted for the uses of these community-based organizations was in fact used for the operational expenditures of the San Francisco Parks Alliance, to the tune that there is now no money left. And nobody knows where it is. And it was really fascinating. The supervisors, this is the first of a series of hearings, only heard from the Parks Alliance board and executive officers. So the testimony we heard today was from the treasurer, the former CEO, and the last CEO. The treasurer had no idea. He was the treasurer for some 17 years. He had no idea that any of this was happening. In fact, it wasn't until June 1st of 2024 that they finally learned through their own diligence, he asserts, that restricted funds were being used for operational expenditures of the San Francisco Parks Alliance. And when asked, who did you tell? Because city money was involved. The city also used the Parks Alliance. And city money disappeared. Did you tell anybody from the city? Did you tell any of your associates, which is what they call the community groups? And the answer was no. We didn't tell anybody. So it wasn't until almost a year later that it became public, or about 6 months later, that it became public that this had gone on. So that it is absolutely essential to figure out a way, when we talk about changing the system that exists, of how we can empower non-bureaucratic neighborhood and community groups who, in the end, it turns out, who stopped the Panhandle Freeway? Neighborhood and community groups. Who built most of the neighborhood-based facilities, rec and park facilities, recreational facilities across San Francisco. Turns out some 24 community groups, neighborhood and community groups. So there is an alternate model, is what I want to say, and that alternate model is community and neighborhood organizations, which means that any effective movement to change the corrupt relationship between the private sector and the public sector in San Francisco requires a level of community organizing that unfortunately does not often occur, especially amongst progressive groups. Progressive groups have a tendency to believe that they and they alone have the solution and only need to raise money to win. The difficulty is, the difficulty is, what happens if they do win? Do they turn the policy back to the existing bureaucracy that in fact created it? Or must we also create an alternate way of delivering? Sanders says, as the billionaires increasingly control government at all levels, corruption increases. There seems to be a relationship between oligarchical political control and simple corruption. And it will be very interesting to see when the good government anti-corrupters actually fall to the notion that it's because of the control of government by the oligarchs. It is fascinating to me to watch that relationship occur in San Francisco. But I do want to point out one bright spot in the city, and much is made of Musk spending, $250 million to elect Trump. And unremarked in the local press is that Mr. Moritz, in the last 5 years, has spent almost $400 million to influence San Francisco politics. Yet, after spending about $20 million on a mayoral candidate and a ballot measure that would have fundamentally removed any citizen oversight of the bureaucracy, after those were both defeated, after him spending $20 million on those two issues last November. So it is possible in a city like San Francisco to unite with a broad array of folk to at least address the most rapacious actions of both the oligarchy in San Francisco. It's a tech-based oligarchy. It's techno real estate. Don't ignore real estate. There's a convergence at Wall Street over, just as in 2008, just as there was then, that real estate is becoming a financial commodity. And as all across the country there are plans to increase residential density, so is unleashed a large wave of speculative real estate investment. And in San Francisco, the two, tech and speculative real estate investment, often occurs with the same people, but they are certainly allies, very powerful allies in San Francisco. But it is possible to beat them. This whole trip of Trump to use ICE to intimidate people and to spread fear and to have the head, to have his secretaries tour Alcatraz and to transform Alcatraz into a prison with sharks is all about selling fear, which they hope paralyzes us. Fuck 'em.
Thank you. I enjoyed the presentations, and I love being back here. I moved to San Francisco in 1978, and right before rent control went into effect, my landlords decided to raise my rent from $125 a month to $175 a month. And I thought that was outrageous, and so I moved. But it's great being back. So I'm going to talk, actually, it's going to be a little bit about Uber, but I'm going to start off talking about the really new big tech means of mobility in San Francisco, which is Waymo. And I don't know how many people have heard this news. It made a little splash. But on April 10th, Mayor Lurie announced that he was welcoming autonomous vehicles onto Market Street. This was part of his plan to revitalize downtown and, using quite a few buzzwords, continue San Francisco's history of innovation and expanding access to local businesses. So Waymo, which is, I guess you all know this, Waymo is the autonomous vehicle developed by Alphabet, Google's parent company, and it's been operating all over San Francisco for the last couple of years, providing paid passenger rides. So Waymo was to begin mapping right away on Market Street and launch passenger service by this summer. And so this was a shock to people, and if you haven't been following this, let me just summarize why. One was Market Street, downtown, east of 10th Street, was made car-free in January 2020. So it had been car-free for 5 years at this point. Second of all, the project to make Market Street car-free had been one of these very long, 10-year-long public projects that had involved a lot of people, a lot of community groups, some of whom we work with, some of whom we in the taxi community actually don't work with, but it was at least a process where you could have attended meetings and given public comment. And then suddenly the mayor just makes this announcement, apparently upending this long plan. And the timing of Mayor Lurie's announcement was pretty bad, because just a week before, the Municipal Transportation Agency announced that they were cutting back several bus lines that ran on Market Street downtown because of this looming financial deficit that the MTA board is facing, as well as the city. So several bus lines that previously went from the outer neighborhoods, I think it was there was the 5 Fulton, the 9 San Bruno, the 31 Balboa, that normally went from an outer neighborhood. The 21 was going to be combined, and the 6. So these buses that normally went from the outer neighborhoods to Market Street and then down Market Street to the Ferry Plaza, or near it, would now turn around when they got to Market Street, and passengers would have to get off and transfer to another bus if they wanted to continue down Market Street. So there we had a situation where an affordable means of public transportation was being cut back, and something that the tech billionaires think we need, and people may disagree about this, autonomous for-hire vehicles, which, by the way, are not cheap to ride in, was being allowed on Market Street. And so there was a lot of kind of sensational press around this the first week or two, and since then it's pretty much died down. But there's still things happening. Waymo hasn't actually launched commercial service yet, although they had previously announced they were going to do so by June. So basically, Mayor Lurie's invitation to Waymo to come down and operate on Market Street got a little more attention than I think he counted on. So first there were the usual suspects. There were the transit advocates, the safety advocates, the bicyclists, the pedestrian advocates, the taxi advocates. But in addition, the other groups that were very, very unhappy with it were Uber and Lyft, who blasted the mayor for favoritism to Waymo, and Uber even sent a mayor a letter threatening to sue the city for blocking them from Market Street. And I'm going to backtrack in a little bit and explain why Uber was blocked from Market Street to begin with. But the more transit advocates pointed out that since this section of Market Street, which is only downtown, east of 10th, basically it's between 10th and Main Street, this section of Market Street has seen like a 40% reduction in collisions, vehicle collisions, since going car-free. And in terms of transit speeds, it's seen a 14% increase in the speed of the muni vehicles, the surface muni vehicles. And the point they make is that these were lasting impacts that were equitably shared, among everyone who uses Market Street. Well, not so much drivers because they can't use it, but people on the bus, people walking, people bicycling. So to backtrack just a little bit and talk about this closing of Market Street to cars, this was actually passed by the MTA board in 2019, in October 2019, after, like I previously mentioned, after like 10 years of various types of public outreach. And then a few months later, in January 2020, they implemented the car-free part of what was to be a massive re-envisioning of Market Street. So making it car-free was the quick build part of this project. The project itself was known as Better Market Street. It was going to take years. There was going to be new sidewalks, street furniture, trees, all kinds of improvements in many people's view to Market Street, as well as, since they were tearing up the streets, they're going to redo the sewer, everything under the street as well. So it was a massive project. So the easiest part to implement was the car-free section. They made signs, they put up the signs, and it went into effect in January 2020. So certain vehicles were allowed. Obviously Muni, and I believe it was AC Transit buses go a short segment on Market Street, but Muni buses, the paratransit vans, taxis, emergency vehicles, and delivery trucks for the merchants along Market Street were to be allowed on the street. But Uber and Lyft were not allowed to operate on Market Street. And the reason for this was because when it came to modifying the transportation code, the word they used for delivery trucks, they used commercial vehicles, which refers to the registration of your vehicle. So Uber and Lyft's vehicles are not registered commercially, which was an exemption to the California Vehicle Code, which Uber lobbied very, very hard to get back in 2015. So they are not commercial vehicles. And Lyft kind of tried to be the good guy with Better Market Street and didn't advocate for access, but Uber did. But they were like ridiculed by everybody because they had lobbied so hard not to be labeled commercial vehicles. So they were blocked. But as it turns out, there are vehicles that operate on the Uber app and on the Lyft app that are commercial vehicles, and this is their higher-end service, known as Uber Black. I don't know what Lyft's is known as, that charge more. They are generally operated independently by individuals who own their own vehicle but do this as a living as opposed to sort of the more part-time Uber and Lyft drivers. Lyft has a similar service. There's independent limo and town car businesses, not to mention the fact that almost every pickup truck has commercial registration based on their weight in addition to their usage. So I would assume that every Tesla Cybertruck is registered as a commercial vehicle. So this was a loophole just waiting to be exploited by someone. And it came about finally on April 10th with Mayor Lurie's announcement. And the idea that, and Waymo itself claims that they could have operated on Market Street all along because they're a commercial registered vehicle, but they just didn't do it out of politeness. And they, and so Uber is mad. Uber says as soon as Waymo starts operating, picking up passengers, they're going to begin operating too, but they're holding back to work it out with Mayor Lurie. And so that's kind of where it stands today. There is a group that have spontaneously sprung up around this to kind of let Mayor Lurie know that this way of making changes to things we are doing in San Francisco is just not acceptable. And so if you're interested, I have a little flyer with a QR code you can scan and sign the petition to Mayor Lurie, basically saying we don't like this. But so for that Waymo, that specific issue on Waymo on Market Street. And of course, it's part of a broader trend toward cutting back affordable public transit and replacing it with vehicles for hire, Ubers, Lyfts, Waymos. Taxis are vehicles for hire too, but we operate a little different than those three, who are not regulated locally, who do not help support San Francisco to any meaningful degree. They are regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission, the same agency that regulates PG&E and does such a great job. And enforcement of the regulations tend to be quite lax. The CPUC does not really have an enforcement arm or a mechanism, so whatever lenient regulations they pass are supposedly self-enforcing. Uber, Lyft, Waymo enforce the rules on themselves supposedly through their reporting. So this is the situation. This is the situation we taxi drivers find ourselves competing in, but this is also the situation that's going to affect more than just us. I think we're the canaries in the coal mine, where our jobs are being affected by the rise of AI, but we may be the first, but we're not going to be the last.
As Bernie Sanders says, as the billionaires increasingly control government at all levels, corruption increases. There seems to be a relationship between oligarchical political control and simple corruption. And it will be very interesting to see when the good government anti-corrupters actually fall to the notion that it's because of the control of government by the oligarchs. It is fascinating to me to watch that relationship occur in San Francisco. But I do want to point out one bright spot in the city, and much is made of Musk spending, $250 million to elect Trump. And unremarked in the local press is that Mr. Moritz, in the last 5 years, has spent almost $400 million to influence San Francisco politics. Yet, after spending about $20 million on a mayoral candidate and a ballot measure that would have fundamentally removed any citizen oversight of the bureaucracy, after those were both defeated, after him spending $20 million on those two issues last November. So it is possible in a city like San Francisco to unite with a broad array of folk to at least address the most rapacious actions of both the oligarchy in San Francisco. It's a tech-based oligarchy. It's techno real estate. Don't ignore real estate. There's a convergence at Wall Street over, just as in 08, just as there was then, that real estate is becoming a financial commodity. And as all across the country there are plans to increase residential density, so is unleashed a large wave of speculative real estate investment. And in San Francisco, the two, tech and speculative real estate investment, often occurs with the same people, but they are certainly allies, very powerful allies in San Francisco. But it is possible to beat them. This whole trip of Trump to use ICE to intimidate people and to spread fear and to have the head, to have his secretaries tour Alcatraz and to transform Alcatraz into a prison with sharks is all about selling fear, which they hope paralyzes us. Fuck them. Let's not be paralyzed.